Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
4 days until the Department of Homeland Security runs out of money. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power, with no deal in sight on ICE restrictions, even as lawmakers today hear testimony from the heads of ICE and Customs Enforcement in their first hearing since the two fatal shootings in Minneapolis. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz in Washington. Yes, Kailey's back. After 6 months and we're still talking about government shutdowns.
Still talking about government shutdowns, still talking about immigration, still talking about the Epstein files, all of which, of course, are on display on Capitol Hill today. It's not just the heads of Customs Border Patrol and ICE that are testifying. The Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, is as well, having to face some difficult questions about his own relationship with the late disgraced financier.
That's for sure. Tough timing and an unrelated hearing, but indeed, we heard a few things in the last tranche of files, and now that Ro Khanna and Tom Massey are all over this, it certainly got the story front burner again. Kailey, when they emerged from the Department of Justice reading room last evening, they found redacted files that were just like the ones made public. These are supposed to be unredacted for private viewing by lawmakers, and they haven't received them yet. Yeah,
and apparently they're getting ready to name more names of people who are listed in these files. So that is obviously one area of focus today. But as you mentioned, Joe, we're also dealing with a pretty rapidly ticking countdown clock to a potential partial government shutdown of a department that affects, 260,000 employees. Indeed. Of course, this is after Democrats said that the White House counterproposal to their 10 proposals that they wanted in terms of reforms for ICE is woefully inadequate. So it seems like we're going nowhere quite fast.
12:01 a.m. Saturday. This is going to feel a lot like it probably did about a week ago. And we're going to talk to Congressman Bryan Steil about that this hour. The Republican from Wisconsin who chairs the admin committee will be with us. And Democratic Congresswoman Suzan DelBene, who runs the DCCC. They're out with a new midterm map. We'll talk to them both this hour.
Yeah, more seats that they're looking to pick up. So we're looking forward to these conversations. Meantime, here in Washington, as Joe and I were just discussing, there's a lot going on. It seems that no one decided to take a break from the news flow to give me an easier path of return here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We have a few things that we're watching on Capitol Hill. Of course, a looming potential partial shutdown come Friday, but also a number of high-profile figures giving testimony in the various chambers today, one of whom is before Senate committee, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, facing some difficult questions specifically about his relations with Jeffrey Epstein, of course, the late disgraced financier, in a visit that the Commerce Secretary actually made to Epstein's Caribbean island some years ago. He was pressed on that, and this is his response.
I literally met him 3 times over 14 years with widespread in between. That's all I can remember. That's all there is in the documents. I didn't look through the documents with any fear whatsoever, because I know, and my wife knows, that I have done absolutely nothing wrong.
Now, we should know that he was to be testifying about broadband deployment, so the timing was difficult for the Commerce Secretary, having told a podcast last year that he vowed in 2005 to never again be in the same room as Epstein, who was his neighbor at one point on the Upper East Side. These documents, though, suggest he continued interactions with Epstein, including that visit to the island as late as 2012. Several years after his conviction, prompting the questions that we saw today. Now, in a completely separate hearing room, it was all about ICE enforcement. We were watching these tandem hearings today, both of which will inform what takes place over the course of this week politically with this administration. DHS funding, of course, in the balance right now as the heads of ICE and Customs and Border Protection faced questions in their first testimony since the two fatal shootings in Minneapolis. And for more on that, we turn to Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall. This plays directly into the debate around funding, Tyler. We've got 4 days until a Homeland funding deadline, and this really exposed the fault lines in this debate.
Right, exactly. It seems like both parties are pretty far apart at this point. It's unclear if negotiations are happening or if we're really at an impasse, because it kind of depends on who you ask on Capitol Hill. If you look to Republican leadership like Senate Majority Leader John Thune, he's saying that there's some optimism here. He's saying that the sides are engaging in good faith discussions, as he put it. But then you ask the Democratic side, and they do not seem impressed with what Republicans have put on the table. In fact, we heard earlier from Democratic leadership in a statement, the Democratic Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who called the Republicans' counter-proposal woefully inadequate, in his words. So there's a lot that we have to watch going forward here. It appears very evident that we're not going to see full fiscal year funding for the Department of Homeland Security. So then the question becomes whether or not they can reach that continuing resolution to kick the can down the road. But at this point, it feels like the two sides are pretty far apart after Democrats outlined their top 10 demands. We know some of those are non-starters for the party, like new warrant requirements or demasking, as it's being called, of federal agents that are doing these immigration operations.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, our Washington correspondent. Thank you so much. It's good to see you, Tyler, here on Bloomberg TV and radio. And as Tyler just said, how you feel about the likelihood of a shutdown or the progress being made on this ICE reform issue probably depends on who you ask on Capitol Hill. So we're going to ask someone there right now. Joining us, I'm pleased to say, live from the House is Republican Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin. He, of course, is the chair of the House Administration Committee. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Sir, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've talked. As you just heard Tyler say, it seems that there is still a bit of daylight between Republicans and Democrats on what reforms both can actually get behind. Sir, what would you be willing to accept?
Kailey, welcome back. Here we are again, Democrats threatening to shut down, and this time a portion of the federal government if they don't get their way. I think what we need to do is have cooler heads prevail. The Department of Homeland Security is an essential agency that covers not only ICE, but also Coast Guard, TSA, and other essential federal government programs. And so the threat of a shutdown is unproductive. At an absolute minimum, we should pass a continuing resolution. And in fact, the House passed complete funding for the entire fiscal year in a bipartisan vote. So at the end of the day, what we need to see is Senate Democrats come to the table to make sure that we can get 60 votes in the Senate, fund this for the full year, allow cooler heads to prevail. And I think what we're seeing is more and more local jurisdictions cooperating with ICE, and that prevents some of the more challenging situations that we've had.
Hey, Congressman, there are a lot of questions about the way this goes, and the calendar is not a friend at the moment. There was only a 2-week continuing resolution, so here we are again up against a deadline. If Democrats and Republicans can't come to terms in the next couple of days here, would you support a continuing resolution of that duration again, or should it be something longer so we don't have to keep coming back around on these?
You know, I don't love CRs, but boy, they're better than shutting down the government or a portion of the government. In this case, 2 weeks is pretty insufficient for Congress to operate. It's too bad that's the case. I'd be open to even a slightly longer CR. But again, this final negotiation is going to take place between about 10 Democrats in the United States Senate with President Trump. It's trusting that they can land this plane. Cooler heads prevail. Getting local jurisdictions to cooperate with ICE and giving that time to reach agreement on this funding deal, I think, is what's going to ultimately be required.
Well, so while the work on a funding agreement happens in the background, Congressman, you, of course, are doing work of your own, including holding a committee hearing on election integrity today, as well, of course, having introduced the Make Elections Great Again, the MEGA Act around election security. That act, as well as the SAVE Act, which, of course, is a kind of tandem effort going on, Congressman, was criticized by Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski as effectively federalizing elections. Is that what you are intending to do? How do you avoid doing that?
Article 1, Section 4 gives authority both to the states to operate elections, but also the authority for Congress to make sure that there's clear laws, to make sure that we have confidence in our elections. The MEGA Act, a portion of which is the SAVE Act, puts forward common sense reforms to reinstate America's trust in our elections. I think it's common sense that we should require, for example, photo identification when an individual goes to the polls. I have to do that if you want to board an airplane, you want to open a bank account, or heck, you want to buy a 6-pack of beer, you need to show photo identification. So it's common sense, it's popular. This is far from the takeover argument that some are attempting to make. It's putting in baseline standards so that all Americans have confidence our elections are being run accurately and fairly.
Do you worry about mission creep here, if I can use that term, Congressman, when you hear President Trump talking about nationalizing elections and taking it out of the hands of the states? In the case of sanctuary cities or states that have sanctuary cities, he says Republicans should run those elections, isolating about 15 states he thinks need that kind of attention. Does that run against the conservative principles that you bring to the table?
Well, I think what it is putting in baseline standards that are needed to operate our elections. Again, the states are going to be the ones operating the elections, but I do think it's appropriate to have a federal standard with which every state must meet at an absolute minimum. 16 states, for example, don't require photo identification when an individual goes to vote. Again, I think all 50 states should require that. We should end elections on election day so the American public knows the results of elections on the night of the elections. These are core principles, they're common sense, and they instill confidence in our elections. And what we saw from the state of Georgia after they implemented election integrity reform in 2021, and they've run 2 statewide elections, is high voter participation, increasing confidence, and as that occurs, more and more people are likely to participate, which is a good thing for our democracy.
Well, and as we consider what will be on the minds of the American electorate as they go to vote, Congressman, we know the economy always features quite heavily in the impact certain fiscal policies and others have on the economy, like, for example, the impact of tariffs that have been levied by the Trump administration. There was supposed to be, just a few hours from now, a procedural vote, a rule vote on what Speaker Johnson is pushing, essentially extending a prohibition of calling snap votes on repealing the president's tariffs. We now understand that has been postponed to 8:30 p.m. this evening. It seems there's a little bit of trouble in the water here, Congressman, as a few of your colleagues have suggested that they will not be voting with the speaker on this. What are you hearing?
Well, there's a lot of dialogue and discussion as to exactly how we move forward. I think we have an opportunity here to work with the president as we strike trade deals, in particular with our allies, to bring those trade barriers down and to give American markets access into foreign markets. For far too long, countries like China have taken advantage of U.S. trade agreements, and holding countries like China, along with our allies, accountable, I think, is absolutely essential. We're going to have a lot of dialogue and debate over this over the next handful of hours. But at the end here, I think the goal is to create these trade agreements with our allies, and I think we have an opportunity to do that.
You know, the Supreme Court at some point is going to rule on this, Congressman. In fact, we thought we would possibly even know by now. How would that potentially argue or complement a law passed by Congress when it comes to the veracity of this tariff regime?
Well, for a number of years, beyond just this administration, we have seen executives, both at the presidential level as well as governors, use emergency orders to take actions that they would like to take without legislative approval. We saw that all throughout the period of COVID. The case before the Supreme Court, I think, could be, depending on how it's written, transformative as we understand emergency powers. Many of the tariffs that the president put forward are dependent on those emergency powers. The Supreme Court may rule, but I think in lieu of that, I think what we would like to see is the president continue to work and finalize these trade agreements with our allies to provide real stability in the trade agreements that we need to keep our economy strong.
And just finally, Congressman, on the subject of the economy, President Trump suggested in an interview with Fox's Larry Kudlow that the economy could be growing at 15% under the leadership of Kevin Warsh if he is confirmed as Fed chair. Take a listen.
We should be at 15%. I'll tell you, if our new head of the Fed, who I think is going to be great, and he's a really high quality person, but if he does the job that he's capable, we can grow at 15%. I think more than that.
You sit on the Financial Services Committee, Congressman. Do you buy 15% GDP growth in the United States of America?
Well, wouldn't we all love to see it? But I think we got a ton of run room in front of us. The underlying economy in the United States is strong. If we continue to work to remove the burdens that have been put in place through red tape, through high regulations, through taxes, and we work to empower the American economy, I think we're going to continue to see strong economic growth. I think it's great that the president is out there cheerleading for the country and putting a high bar in front of us, but we should all be working to drive forward economic growth, in particular as we look at a period of time where debt and deficits are significant challenges in front of us. The biggest answer to get out of this situation is to grow the economy at rates that we haven't seen. We've seen strong economic growth over the course of the past few quarters. I think we have an opportunity to continue to build on that success.
Congressman, it's great to have you back. Thank you for the insights. As always, Bryan Steil of Wisconsin, the chairman of the House Admin Committee. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz, live in Washington. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. We assemble our panel for their take on everything we just heard. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis back together now. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick, our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. I'm going to park the 15% economic growth over here for just a minute, Jeanne. Did that make you think that we might avoid a government shutdown, or is it just a question of how long the CR needs to be?
Well, it was good to hear the representative is open to the CR, and I agree with him. It should be more than 2 weeks if he gets it. I am not convinced myself listening to that committee hearing. Hopefully, I'm wrong, but I'm not convinced they're going to get there. And I think one of the big questions on the Republican side, or for the Republicans, is why are you committed to the masking, the doxing, and everything else they've talked about? No federal officials are masked except for certain circumstances. None of our law enforcement officials are masked. Why is that going to be a bridge that you would, quote unquote, die on? So that's something. And then, of course, why oppose judicial warrants? The other big sticking point, that's the Constitution. So I think there is room to maneuver, but we haven't heard those conversations yet. And they're going to be critical to getting a deal on this.
Well, and Rick, something else we're hearing from Republicans is ICE was already funded through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So if you shut down, you're shutting down TSA and FEMA. Is that a winning argument for them?
First of all, great to have you back, Kailey. Yeah, I don't think it's a winning argument for either side at this point. What's kind of interesting is nobody seems to have any leverage on this. I don't know anybody who actually thinks it's a great idea to shut down DHS, at least the non-ICE portions of it. Nobody has articulated a reason to want to do that. And yet nobody also seems to want to compromise. You've got, 10 guardrails the Democrats put out. To me, it's as simple as coming up with, pick 5 of those, and one of them can't be masking.
All right, go for 100%, maybe get 50%. We'll see. But we have 100% of our panel here with us today, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino. They'll be back for more in just a few minutes as we get ready to talk to the chair of the DCCC. She's in charge of getting Democrats elected to the House. Congresswoman Suzan DelBene will be with us next here in Balance of Power, live from Washington on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Kailey Leinz, back in Washington alongside Joe Mathieu here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm on air for the first time in 2026, actually on air for the first time since midway through 2025. But it's good to be back, Joe, and it's good to be back especially at the beginning innings here of a midterm year. Yes, we have elections coming up in November, just about 9 months from now. And of course, all eyes are focused specifically on whether or not Republicans can retain control here in Washington. The area in which that might be most vulnerable to change is, of course, the House of Representatives, where the margins are already incredibly tight, difficult for Speaker Johnson. And Democrats are feeling pretty optimistic that they could become the majority, even more optimistic if you take a look at what the DCCC is putting out today. They're targeting 5 more seats in this cycle, bringing the total, Joe, to 44. Democratic optimism is on the rise. One thing that has crept into the sort of daily conversation since you left us 6 months ago is the Senate being in play. And I mean, to the point of where we're calling it a very favorable map and a favorable bit of timing for Democrats. We're going to focus on the House now, to your point, with the woman who is charged with getting Democrats elected and retaking the majority. The DCCC announcing its second expansion. It's out with this new map that contains, to Kailey's point, 5 additional seats: Colorado, Minnesota, Montana, South Carolina, and Virginia. Congresswoman Suzan DelBene is chair of the DCCC. The Democrat from Washington State joins us right now. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. Welcome back. It's nice to see you as Kailey returns to our conversation. Yes, and exactly. We had to bring the chairwoman here for this opportunity. I'm just wondering, you add 5. What's emboldening you and making you feel ever more confident to have a second revision to this map?
Well, we're listening to the American people, and all across the country, people are souring on the Republican agenda. Families are hurting in every corner of the country. It's hard to get by. There's no interest from Republicans in addressing the affordability issues that they're feeling across the country. Republicans promised to lower costs on day one. Prices are skyrocketing, all because of actions of this administration and Republicans in Congress. people want representatives who are going to stand up for them. And so we have opportunities all across the country. And as you said, we added 5 more because there are 5 more opportunities we have to flip the House. So 44 in total on our offensive map. We need to net 3 to take back the gavels in November.
Yeah, it is a relatively small number, Chairwoman, and thank you for the warm welcome back. As we consider what you were just talking about here, the notion that Americans are hurting from a financial standpoint, this still seems to be an economy argument. You think you're on the side of winning. Is that true? Is it not a shift in the wind on immigration and ICE, for example, that you also are hoping to ride here?
You know, across the country, people are struggling and prices have skyrocketed. Food, housing, healthcare, childcare, energy costs, all going up, and all going up because of actions of this administration. And they don't care. You heard the president talk about affordability as a hoax. You've heard him say that the economy is doing great, but the reason that people don't listen to that anymore is because that's not what they're feeling. That's not what they're seeing in their checkbook right now. So they need folks who are going to stand up for them. We have folks, incredible candidates running across the country, going to stand up, fight to make sure that American families are doing well, not just fight for the wealthy and well-connected. That seems to be the focus of Republicans. And yes, fight for safety in our communities, fight for due process. All these issues are important. Affordability is what we're hearing from folks in every part of the country.
Congresswoman, you started talking about the fundamental reasons why you think these seats are in play, pointing to the economy. Of course, here you just mentioned immigration, add health care, price hiking, tariffs to your point. I'm wondering about the technicals here. These new targets are all in districts that President Trump won by 13% or less. What brought you to that threshold? Was it internal polling or the anecdotal evidence you're pointing to?
Well, we look at all of these districts, specifically at what's happening on the ground in these districts. But yes, all of these districts, Trump won by 13 points or less. In special elections across the country, Democrats have been running 13 points ahead. And in congressional special elections since November of 2024, Democrats have been running 17 points ahead across the country. But if you look at these districts specifically, I'll take Minnesota 1 as an example. Amy Klobuchar, a Democratic senator there, has won in that district twice. We look kind of at these districts and we know that they have folks who want to stand up for them. And when we have great candidates running who are talking about the issues that matter, we can win. We had 14 Democrats win in districts that Donald Trump also won in 2024. Now that support for Trump has tanked. People are tired of Republicans who are not addressing the issues that matter for them, making their lives worse. So we have strong support across the country, great candidates, absolutely reason we'll take back the House in November.
Well, Congresswoman, as we consider the policies of President Trump, many of which, of course, do affect the economy, tariffs are one of those that may feature most prominently. We were just talking with your Republican colleague, Bryan Steil of Wisconsin, about the now postponed procedural vote on a rule to advance the Speaker's effort to essentially put another block on calling snap votes to repeal President Trump's tariffs. It seems that there are some Republicans who, along with Democrats, would not like to see that go forward. What are you hearing from your colleagues across the aisle who are a bit hesitant around the president's tariff policy? Do you think the midterms are the reason why?
Well, let's be clear. Congress has the authority and Congress needs to vote on these tariffs. It is just astounding that Republicans over and over again are even scared of taking a vote on this. Remember, this vote that we're having today is so they can avoid taking a vote on tariffs. And yet, that's our job as members of Congress, to vote on important issues. And this is an issue that Congress needs to weigh in on. If they think these tariffs are great, then they can vote yes and support Trump's sweeping tariffs that are raising prices across the country. But they don't even have the courage to stand up and just take a vote. They are hiding, and they're trying again through this vote today to hide again so they don't have to take a vote. That's another reason people across the country are souring on Republicans. They want representatives who are going to stand up for them. We should stand up as a co-equal branch in Congress. Take a vote. if you like those tariffs, they can vote yes, but I have been fighting against these sweeping tariffs. The president doesn't have this authority. And let's be clear, these are taxes on the American people. It's raising costs on families across the country.
We saw the response, Congresswoman, from Democratic leaders to the restrictions on ICE that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries had been put forward. The response from the administration was clearly not acceptable. Are we going to watch the Department of Homeland Security shut down Friday night?
This is really up to Republicans. People across the country have been horrified by what they've seen all across the country. Renee Good and Alex Preddy being killed for no reason in Minneapolis. Horrific stories, not only in Minnesota, but in all parts of the country. Absolutely, people are demanding reforms. We are demanding reforms too. There should be due process. There should be a rule of law. That's what the American people want to see. Republicans need to be listening to their constituents. They should be standing up as well. If they are willing to actually listen to their communities and do what their communities are asking for, then we would be able to find a path forward. But as we've seen in all things, they've been unwilling to do that over and over again. And now they're at risk of shutting down the Department of Homeland Security.
All right, Congresswoman, we appreciate you joining us here on Bloomberg TV and Radio. The Democratic Congresswoman from Washington, Suzan DelBene, chair, of course, of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, now eyeing 44 potential pickups in terms of seats in the midterms in November. So let's get a reaction to that number as we reassemble our political panel here. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors, are still with us. Jeanne, it does seem that Democratic optimism is in the air. Do you share it, or do you think 44 might be a number that's quite high?
You know, I share it. And I think the representative, she made an excellent point. Democrats have been overperforming by 17 points. They've won almost every, if not every, election since Donald Trump was elected. And of course, they're looking at the same polls we are, Kailey. And what are those polls showing? If this is a referendum on the Trump administration and GOP control of Washington, D.C., even members of the Republican Party who helped elect Donald Trump in 2024 do not like what they're seeing, particularly as it pertains to the economy, costs, inflation, and this big issue of affordability, not to mention the other issues of corruption, chaos, and what's happening in immigration. You couple all that, it should be a very good year for Democrats. And you can hear sort of the enthusiasm in the Congresswoman's discussion with you guys, that they're feeling the excitement, if you will. And thank you, because I love a good election story, as you know, Kailey.
Well, remember the shellacking? I think that was 2010 when Barack Obama lost, I believe, more than 60 seats. Rick, it's hard to imagine a turn of fortune on that level. Do you buy the math as Kailey is asking? And do you think we'll see a third revision from the DCCC?
I definitely think you could see a third revision by the DCCC. Look, forget all the issues, right? Jeannie's right. Those are the issues people are going to campaign on. But this is what I really watch. First of all, the cyclical nature of the midterms. They're always against the party in power, always. And so you know that Trump's going to have a hard time holding the House just because it's a midterm election. Two, redistricting is now inuring potentially to the benefit of the Democrats, because part of the other cyclical nature of this is that because of realignment, a lot of our voters aren't the type that vote in midterms or special elections, as Jeanne pointed out. Democrats have won every special election statewide since Donald Trump became president. Why? Because mostly Republicans don't show up for these kinds of votes. So when you start looking at that, you say, well, these 5, redistricts, congressional districts in Texas, where we took safe Republican seats and made them less safe so that we could make more of them, actually may have resulted in actually making more states less potentially successful. And so, if you look at Donald Trump, and in the districts we've seen, when you see over 15% of Donald Trump, won in 2024, are losing, then you say, well, how many districts are plus Donald Trump, by 15%? Oh, it's about 46 districts. Well, that's what the target is.
Sounds like the math is mathing. I'm glad we had this opportunity with Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino. We'll stay in touch if there is a third revision. Bloomberg Politics contributors, always great to bring insights to us here on Balance of Power. We drive forward. Alongside Kailey, Leinz, I'm Joe Mathieu, live from Washington. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. We turn our attention now to Norah Mulinda, who's at World Headquarters in New York, to have a bit of a deeper dive on what's going on here. As Norah, we know retail sales left us wanting a bit this morning, and retail stocks are responding accordingly. TJX is lower, Costco, Walmart, Simon. This is obviously only part of the picture, though, as we look back to this big rebound in tech shares. How do we call this market today?
Well, we're certainly seeing the market wavering, but still near record highs. I mean, we know the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit a record at yesterday's closing bell, and it's still hanging around there along with the S&P 500. But as you mentioned, we did get that retail sales report this morning, and we know that investors, analysts tend to hinge on this economic data. We did see that retail sales stalled in December, so you're certainly seeing that ricocheting into the market as we see a lot of these stocks getting hit, but also people are looking ahead to earnings as we've kind of made it through the bulk of the tech earnings season. We're now looking a bit toward retail consumer. We're going to be getting McDonald's. That's one that people are focusing on this week. So it's a lot to parse through, but we're still seeing the market hanging in there.
Yeah, will it hang in there through the jobs report tomorrow, CPI on Friday, both of which, of course, are days that we wouldn't usually see that economic data. Government shutdown is to blame. Once again, point the finger at Washington, I guess, Norah. So that hasn't changed since I went out on leave. I got to say, when I was out on leave, I was so ambitious, and Joe knows this. I thought I was going to watch like every show that ever existed. I was going to be on the couch with my baby. I was just going to rip through everything in the Netflix archive, you name it. Didn't get to do that. Turns out caring for a baby is a little bit harder than I thought. I did, though, get to read about Netflix's efforts to take over Warner Brothers. And, of course, Paramount, Skydance wanting to do the same, now offering to pay the breakup fee if they don't take the Netflix deal. Norah, what's going on with this stock?
Well, Kailey, you are in the loop. I mean, this saga still continues here as we see this fight over Warner Brothers Discovery. We've got Paramount, Skydance on one end vying for it, but we also have Netflix in focus. But what people are really dissecting today is the fact that we did see that Paramount, Skydance did make enhancements to its hostile bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. They're really trying to address some of those concerns that they feel could be potentially blocking the deal. They talked about covering a $2.8 billion termination fee if Warner Brothers Discovery decides to pay Netflix if it ends the already agreed upon agreement. So we are seeing shares. I'm taking a look at Warner Brothers Discovery up about 2%. Paramount, Skydance, and Netflix also higher right now as we see in trading. So it seems as though shareholders weren't too rattled, at least in terms of Netflix on that end. We're not seeing them being too rattled. We're still seeing all three of these stocks in the green, but it'll be interesting to continue to follow this as we move forward into another chapter.
Just real quick, Norah, what should we expect? Kailey mentioned CPI and a jobs. It's going to be Jobs Wednesday tomorrow. These are potential market movers.
Yeah, I mean, how irregular. We're so used to a Jobs Friday, but as Kailey earlier mentioned, we did have that partial government shutdown. So we're going to get the jobs report tomorrow instead. But a lot of investors and really many of my sources are really just hinging on what this means for the outlook. Of course, the focus still remains on the Fed. People are really looking for some sort of interest rate cut as we look ahead. So all of this data really underpins how people view the economy and what it means for policy moving forward.
And how people view the economy also affects how they vote moving forward. Norah Mulinda, Bloomberg's very own, thank you so much. And as we consider how they vote and the actual mechanisms through which people can vote, what they would need to provide to be able to exercise that key element of democracy, that is something that is the subject of debate right now on Capitol Hill as Republican lawmakers are pushing various pieces of legislation intended, as they say, to improve the integrity of elections in America. One such effort is being spearheaded by Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin, the chair of the House Administration Committee, who introduced the MEGA Act and talked to us about what it's intended to achieve earlier this hour.
I think it's common sense that we should require, for example, photo identification when an individual goes to the polls. I have to do that if you want to board an airplane, you want to open a bank account, or heck, you want to buy a six-pack of beer, you need to show photo identification. So it's common sense, it's popular. This is far from the takeover argument that some are attempting to make. It's putting in baseline standards so that all Americans have confidence our elections are being run accurately and fairly.
That's the chair of the House Administration Committee. We now turn to its ranking member. Congressman Joe Morelle, the Democrat from New York, is here with us now on Bloomberg TV and radio. So you just heard your colleague's argument there, Congressman. We appreciate you joining us. What is your response?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, it would be one thing if there was any degree of lack of confidence by Americans or there was evidence of fraud in America. None of that is true. Actually, elections come off very well. Local and state election officials do elections incredibly well. What this is really is the chaos and recklessness of the Trump administration, who the president knows the American people are very, very frustrated and angry what's happening with the Department of Homeland Security and ICE on our city streets. They're very concerned about the lack of affordability and how badly this economy is going. 70% of Americans think the economy is in worse direction than it was when Donald Trump became president. This is really a misdirection. It's a way, as the president has said, he says the quiet part out loud, a way to seize American elections, to nationalize them, take that power away from the states, and give voter data to the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know of anybody in America who thinks it's a good idea to give Secretary Noem access to private information that you supply when you register to vote. So I understand what my colleagues are saying, but this is really a misdirection play, and it's very, very frightening because Americans don't want their election and their midterms taken away from them.
Well, Democrats are not on board here, right? So I'm assuming this would have trouble passing the Senate when it comes to getting 60 votes. But how would you respond to what else President Trump would say? That Democrats want illegal aliens to vote because they vote Democratic.
Well, look, the president has said this for years. He even said that Minnesota, which is very much in the news these days, and they tried to blackmail Minnesota into giving them the voter file for the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security. But the president famously said, I won Minnesota 3 times. I never get credit for it. The truth is the president denies election results. He's done it around the 2020 election so far as having his head of national intelligence go at the direction of the Department of Justice to seize ballots from the 2020 election 5 years ago. It's like, get over it, Mr. President. Illegal people who are not registered to vote, who are not American citizens, don't vote in American elections. It's against the law. And it's a felony if you try to vote. So whenever you ask Republicans, could you provide evidence that non-citizens are voting? No, we just have a feel. Can you provide evidence that there's widespread voter fraud? No, it's just a feeling we have. So, look, these are solutions in search of problems. American elections are secure. Trying to suggest they're not is only shaking the confidence, trying to shake the confidence of American voters. We're not going to tolerate it, and we're certainly not going to let Donald Trump try to nationalize elections and take them for his own in 2026 in advance of the midterm elections.
Well, Congressman, you point at Minnesota as an example of where we're seeing this election debate, obviously very heated. But Minnesota, of course, has captured our attention for other reasons, including, of course, the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at the hands of ICE officers. That is why Democrats are now demanding reforms to ICE. 10 is what your leadership was seeking, 10 changes that they would like to see in order to continue funding the Department of Homeland Security. We understand the White House Republicans issued a response. Your leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has described that counter as woefully inadequate. What is the minimum bar for you, sir, as to what reforms would be adequate, where compromise could be found?
Yeah, I don't think it's just Democrats. I think the American public has real concerns, and they've seen this unfold in videos in front of their eyes, and they can see what's happening in Minnesota. They also see that the Department of Homeland Security and the president continue to misrepresent what's in those videos, calling people domestic terrorists who are peacefully protesting, as is their right under the Constitution. I think the very minimum, ICE agents ought to act the same way that law enforcement does all around this country. No masks. You can see a police officer. They should have a badge. They should have body cameras. They should have to get, if they're going to search your home, they need to get a judicial warrant. That's embodied in the United States Constitution. These are fundamental rights which ICE is trying to take away in violation of the Constitution. We simply want to have the same kind of rules for ICE that you would have for any member of a local police force anywhere in the United States.
We've talked to a number of Republican lawmakers about this demasking issue and the identification issue, Congressman, and they are dug in on this. This is a deal breaker and a non-starter, and they point to the doxing and identifying and harassment of these ICE agents and their families. How do we continue the conversation from there? Because that's where the breakdown happens. What do you tell your Republican colleagues when you're not on camera and you're talking about issues in the cloakroom or at dinner?
Well, look at every police officer in America goes unmasked in communities where they live. So if there was people who are going to be targeted, it would be your local law enforcement who lives in the same community that they do public safety in. The truth is, this is just a way to intimidate people. It's a way to hide your identity. Frankly, I think it's dangerous for ICE officials and ICE agents, as well as certainly, and most importantly, dangerous for residents of our community. So it's a basic fundamental thing that we've had since the birth of this republic 250 years ago. These basic rules need to be followed, and we don't do it for FBI officials. We don't do it for local law enforcement officials. We don't do it for anyone in law enforcement. Why would we do it for ICE agents who are now swarming our streets all over this country?
Well, of course, as we consider the funding that backs those agents, Congressman, that was provided, a great deal of it, in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which already passed. It isn't necessary for DHS funding to be passed on Friday for that to continue. What it is necessary to continue, FEMA TSA does rely on DHS not shutting down. That is an argument your Republican colleagues are making. Why is it worth it to shut down DHS if it isn't necessarily going to impact ICE directly?
Well, what I would say is if that's the case, and I think you're right, it is, ICE doesn't need the money. So why not fund the Coast Guard? Why not fund TSA? Why not fund FEMA? We could do all of that and not fund ICE as we continue to negotiate because, as you point out, ICE already has the money they need. So why would they use ICE, which doesn't need the funding, to hold hostage the folks that do transit agents at TSS or TSA or the Coast Guard? For God's sake, the Coast Guard? You're going to defund the Coast Guard? So let's fund these other things. It's entirely appropriate while we continue to work towards trying to find common ground about the way ICE agents act out and when they're engaged in the American public. And be certain of this, Americans are very unhappy with ICE. It's very unpopular because they've seen 2 American citizens. These weren't so-called non-documented people. 2 American citizens are dead within the last 3 weeks at the hands of federal agents. That's why Americans are so angry, and that's why they're with us on the question of how to reform ICE so that it represents the values of the American people.
Well, you're not just ranking member on the admin committee, Congressman, you're vice ranking member on the appropriations committee. How would that happen? I hate to warn you, we only have a little more than a minute left. Can you actually take ICE funding from the rest of that bill and essentially siphon that off from the rest? Would you have to create a whole new funding bill just for that department, or how would it work?
Yeah, maybe you just put it in the appropriation bill that's in front of the House, strip out the ICE funding, and zero it out because it has funding under the other bill. So you can do this. It would take no imagination,
can you get that done
no
by
creativity.
Friday?
Yeah, sure.
So then we don't shut down. Does Hakeem Jeffries support that?
Well, you'd have to ask him, but I'm pretty sure he'd be very happy if we did that, yes.
I'm just listening to you talk to Kailey. I think we might have just figured this out.
4 days in advance?
See that? Exactly.
Ahead of a deadline in Washington?
Deadlines.
I don't know, Joe.
So
Congressman, thank you for being with us. Yeah, exactly right. Joe Morelle from New York, the 24th District. That's up around Rochester, where I bet it's awfully cold today. And we appreciate the insights, Congressman. What a treat to have you back. We're going to do this again at 5 o'clock. Or you got one more in you? All right. Late edition of Balance of Power featuring the great Kailey Leinz. I'll be here, too, on Bloomberg TV and radio. We're going to have our eyes on this debate and, of course, on whatever might come from the Epstein files with more lawmakers making their way over to DOJ.
Yep, and Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, in the spotlight in that regard today. We'll have more ahead later this afternoon right here on Bloomberg TV and radio.